think everyone's creative and has it in them, and being able to access it and be able to make something or do something without worrying about what anyone else thinks, because that's the key thing. If you can't be worried about what other people are going to think about what you do. You just got to go for it. To be able to do that is such a great thing, you know. And everyone needs to do that to a certain degree. I mean, it could be just something like having a garden, you know, anything, you know. It's difficult to know why I chose New York, but I just thought I'd have a go at it. And I was in London shortly before I left. I'd already decided to go, and I met a gallery owner. He was Irish. I think he collected Yeats. And when I told him I was going to New York, he said to me, "That's a great city for women." And I felt, well, that's an interesting thing to say, a great city for women. And it turned out to be completely true. I had to learn your ways and habits. You were the catch that I was after. But I looked up and I was in your... I was at the generation that was just beginning to, women that is, that was just beginning to see other options other than looking for a husband and getting married, you know. I was just right there at that border, you know, where things were beginning to change. The beginning of feminism. That really affected me when I read the first tracts that were like, you know, photocopied somewhere in France. I read that. I couldn't believe what I was reading, you know. It was like a revolution but just sparks went off in my head. I couldn't believe it, you know, that people were writing this, because it just felt so amazing. And when I went to New York first, because I went there and then left again and came back, I met somebody who was a photographer's assistant, right? He was doing the job I wanted to do. And he was working for a high-end commercial photographer, and he'd been to the School of Visual Arts and had his own photography thing going. And he taught me how to use the darkroom. And so I started taking I began with photographs. And then when I moved down to the Lower East Side, I was walking by 4th Street where Millennium Film Workshop is and saw the sign up and said, well, what's that? And went in there, and you could just, you know, join like a little, like Temple Bar film base, and rent out a camera, and off you go kind of thing. But I was very much on my own then. I was kind of shooting little bits of film and going in and looking what other people had shot, and it wasn't terribly interesting sort of material. But then one day, and it was my birthday, I met a group of people who were kind of on the scene, as it were, who were hanging out in CBGB's, blah, blah, blah. And they were talking about working with Super 8 and making films and making little stories and using their friends as cast. And I completely felt, wow, this is what I want to do as well. I want to do this. And these people were Scott and Beth B and Eric Mitchell and James Nares, those people. And so we started making films separately and together. We made our own films, but we kind of shared equipment and stuff. And sometimes the same people appeared in each film. And we started showing them in clubs. That was our kind of world, you know. So it wasn't like trying to get into the film thing through the independent film scene. It was kind of making our own scene. They even set up, some of them even set up a place called the New Cinema, which screened works, our films. And it was packed out, you know, people came. Yeah. Women have to fight really, really hard to get the funding or to get support to do, say, a feature film. I know, because I know a lot of people who've done it. And it's just outrageous, you know, it's crazy, you know. I know it's hard for everybody, but, you know, it seems to be like, if you just take an example, the film board, and they're aware of it now, they're kind of ashamed, I think, because, I mean, after this Waking the Feminists and you see what's happening with the plays, they know damn well that they fund all these films by young lads, you know, that are the same kind of film, you know, horror films or crime fiction, and do we need to see another one of them, you know? Are they that interesting? No, they're not. They're actually really boring, you know. I think. I mean, there's other kinds of films out there, but they can't get their heads around it, you know. If they had a few more women in the panel, things might be different, you know. There was a lot of unemployment in New York at the time, like people leaving college, art college and that, they couldn't get any work. And they were attracted to New York because they were reading about you know, performance art and music. And the music was just beginning when I got there. I was kind of just getting going. That is the punk thing or the no wave thing. But it wasn't just punk and no wave. There was lots of other kinds of music as well, like experimental music and jazz and all sorts, you know. Yeah, people were attracted to New York because you could hang out and you could afford the rent and you could get a job as a waitress or something like that, and that would see you through, you know what I mean? It would pay everything. You'd work maybe for a lunch session and that would be it. I was uptown in the 80s somewhere. I had rented a studio. It was kind of a bit bland. And then I kind of wandered around, and as I was wandering around the Lower East Side, I said, oh, I could live here. It just seems quite a funky kind of place, you know. And of course, it was attracted to lower rents as well. But it was great. It was full of, at the time when I moved in, which would have been 77, say, even 76, 77, rents were low was one thing. The other thing was it seemed to be very community orientated. Like uptown, people weren't hanging out in the streets. Here they were sitting on the steps and chatting and up on the rooftops, which they have flat roofs there in the buildings. And they were old tenements, you know, but they were grand, like very nice. I thought they were great, you know. What got me down to CBGB's the first time was a photograph of Patti Smith in the Village Voice, and it was taken by Robert Mapplethorpe, just this tiny little photograph, and it said she was playing in CBGB's, and I said, wow, she looks really interesting. So I went down to see Patti Smith in CBGB's. That was my first trip there, and I said, this is really an interesting place, so I started to go back. I mean, you go to a club a few times and you start to get to know faces, or you start to talk to someone, or whatever, or there's a band you like and you continue to go and see them. Like I had my bands I would go and see. Whenever they played, I'd go and see them. And there'd be the same crowd there, more or less. And then that was from there I started to make Gary R Talks, which is like portraits. There are people I was meeting who were playing in bands, and I just thought they were amazing. I'd never seen anything like it, you know, very androgynous, and you know, it was something new, you know, to see women do this, to look like that and have that kind of energy and be completely like sort of self-sufficient, you know. They weren't running around looking for husbands, you know what I mean? I was more interested in the no-wave bands that were kind of really I don't know what to call it really. Mars, DNA, The Contortions was my favourite band. That was kind of funky sound, but really it's kind of hard, you know what I mean? They were quite aggressive, you know. But for whatever reason, I really felt alive there in the audience listening to them. They kind of fired me up, you know. I just felt, this is fucking brilliant. I didn't analyse why. I just really liked it, yeah. Dissonant, a kind of dissonant sound, but kind of funky, kind of off the wall, you know. And he'd put on this act like sort of attacking the audience, but it was all put on, you know, it was all performance. And Lydia's lunch band, which was Teenage Jesus and the Jerks, that was, I'd never seen the like before, no. I just thought the name of the band was amazing as well. I went up to her and asked her, could I film her for Gary R Talks? That was the first time to speak to her, so it was kind of like a way to talk to her. And it just turned into a nice kind of friendship. I mean, she invited me to the studio where they were rehearsing, and I ended up being one of her bands, and Beirut Slump, playing keyboards, and that was fun. I really felt great, like playing in a band, because I'd played music at school, but it was always on your own. It wasn't with other people. So I really enjoyed playing with others, you know, such fun. I mean, there's a thing about my films that it's out of control a little bit. There's kind of a control in it, and there's also a sense where you allow things to happen and you don't know where it's going to end up. There's always that in it, so it's kind of leaving the door open for chance. So there's a risk element to those films, and it kind of shows in the film. You can see that, the edge, you know, of that. Where you get results that are you kind of couldn't get with actors, or you couldn't get with something that was scripted. It's something different, you know, yeah. And I'm interested in that.
So messy, Chrissy. It's all such a mess. All your clothes are broken.
It's not really it's like what the content is, what it's about, or what energy it has, you know. It doesn't have to be, I mean, I think you can make a really good film with very low budget. It's really the kind of having the desire or the impetus that you want to do something. That's the most important thing, you know. Like, I mean, what made me make a film in the first place, like, say, Gary or Talks? It's hard to answer that question. I just had to do it, you know. It's just something I was driven to do without really thinking that I'm going to show this to people or anything, you know. I just made these little portraits because I felt something, this needed to be, I thought the people were really interesting and needed to be recorded. I was right, actually. Yeah, it did need to be recorded. I think art's more and more important because it's the free imagination. It's what we must not let be colonised. We must not allow that to be colonised.